Season 1 of The Witcher was good. The show had a sense of humor and it had its own personality, which is a heck of a lot more than I could say for a lot of these fantasy shows that have come out in the last couple of years that are very clearly trying to piggyback off the monumental success of Game of Thrones. We've had Carnival Row and we've had that grandiose yet strangely inert adaptation of Wheel of Time, to name two particularly painful examples. Now, like a lot of my fellow critics, I had a lot of reservations about The Witcher in its first season, and I think there are a lot of things in that first season that could have been better, and I think the structure was unnecessarily confusing, but there was still a heart there. There was still a distinct style, and I hoped that the show would get even better in Season 2, and it did. It's many steps up above all those tedious shows that so desperately want to be the next Game of Thrones without understanding why exactly Game of Thrones worked in the first place. That it was the people and the situations and the strategic politicking and the difficult choices that people needed to make, not the costly and overly grandiose battle sequences. I'm not at all surprised that The Witcher became so popular among the general public, and I think that popularity is very much deserved. I'm not at all surprised also that Toss a Coin to Your Witcher became so internet famous for months and months after Season 1 of The Witcher was released, to the extent that it was basically inescapable. Season 2 keeps that sense of humor, and it keeps the epic scale that The Witcher so clearly values. But it also adds a lot of emotional nuance, and it adds a sense of maturity, not in a bland and soul-draining way, but in a way that allows us a deeper level of insight into these characters, especially Geralt, whom I am far more interested in than I was back in Season 1. The improvements the show makes in Season 2 bring it much closer to what I loved about the Witcher games, especially The Witcher 3. Geralt has to balance his rugged warrior ethos with his need to forge a close bond with Ciri and be a strong and yet caring father to her. Pairing a grizzled and cynical and hard-boiled adult male with an impassioned and anxious teenage girl has become strangely common in the last 10 or so years. The best examples I can think of are Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us, and also Logan and Laura in the movie Logan, though there are, of course, many, many more examples of this dynamic that are not nearly good enough to be mentioned in the same context as the two examples I've just noted. You can also very much see it in the Witcher games, especially The Witcher 3, in how the bond between Ciri and Geralt is developed. And the show very much draws from that bond in those games while also extending it and delving deeper into it in a lot of really interesting ways. Again, this dynamic is not a particularly recent development, but it is something that has become more common recently. I remember a great Kotaku article a couple years back called The Daddening of Video Games, and Sage Hayden at Just Right's take on that in relation to The Witcher and The Last of Us is a brilliant video essay that I really recommend y'all watch if you haven't already. What I'm really trying to emphasize here is that this father-daughter dynamic is so common these days for a reason. There's a lot of inherent drama to it that can be coaxed out through skilled writing. You have this cynical loner who has to try and survive in a callous and uncaring world. And he's good at that, but he's also emotionally isolated, which makes it particularly challenging when he has to try and take on the responsibilities of caring for this passionate, caring, younger person who can also be mocking and wry at times, but also is earnest and sincere and very much wants more for herself than just the dead-eyed loner world that the grizzled old male hero inhabits. And these characters, Geralt, Joel, all of them, Logan, they must come to grips with the fact that although this emotional isolation they've cultivated allows them to survive, it's also alienating and spirit deadening, and they must try and open themselves up to this person who really needs them and form a strong connection with them. Geralt in Season 2 of The Witcher prizes this connection with Ciri and tries to cultivate that connection, even though doing so is difficult for him, because it's completely alien to this grizzled loner lifestyle that he has committed himself to. Henry Cavill is great as Geralt for the same reason that he worked so well as a villain in the most recent Mission Impossible movie, and for the same reason that he did not really work as Superman in those Zack Snyder movies. Cavill is not robotic necessarily, but he has this darkened intensity to him that lends himself more to villainous or anti-heroic roles. There's a real desperation in how he plays Geralt, but also a real awkwardness in handling human connections, which really works for this character who is so much more accustomed to being a Witcher than doing what is for him the much harder task of connecting with Ciri. Geralt is sullen, and he's used to the rejection of the world. These are not necessarily anti-heroic or even negative traits. They can be understandable in a lot of contexts, and they are understandable in Geralt's context. But they are also traits that lead one to alienation and loneliness. And that is what he must try to move past through his dedication to this bond with Ciri, to this dedication to really be a firm but caring and compassionate father. This is a lot harder for him because exactly how he needs to help Ciri is not always exactly clear. It is not a case where, oh, he just needs to protect her from XYZ. He must take on this more complicated and nuanced fatherly role where he does want to protect her and help her with all her feelings of anxiety and instability and uncertainty, but he also doesn't want to smother her. He wants to allow her the independence she needs to make decisions for herself. Ciri is the one with the grand destiny, and she is willing to accept that prophesized destiny, but she is a lot more worried about herself than she is willing to admit. She's a lot more anxious and doubtful as to whether she's going to be able to live up to the role that she has taken on. Her sense of identity is not secure. Though she knows what she wants a role to be, she does not know how to approach that role. He must try and help Ciri weather these storms of tumult and despair while also not losing herself. She is an adult, she has her own life and her own responsibilities, and he wants to respect that, but still help her. And that's hard. That's hard for anyone, especially someone like Geralt, who has been so used to emotional isolation. but he knows that helping Ciri is his opportunity to not decay into a cynical husk of himself. That bond with Ciri is very important to him, and he's willing to fight for it, as flawed as he is in the role of father figure for Ciri. And that's really compelling to watch, at least to me. It doesn't make him any less of a bold and brave and slightly wry warrior, but it does make him more than that, and a more compelling character to watch in The Witcher. So anyway, thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. What do you think about Season 2 of The Witcher, if you've seen it? Do you think it is an improvement over Season 1? If so, why? Sound off in the comments. I'm interested to know what you think. And I'm interested to know how you think the show handled the bond between Geralt and Ciri, especially in comparison to the games. Anyway, I'm really thinking that 2022, the upcoming year, is going to be a grandiose and wonderful year for fantasy, with both Game of Thrones and The Lord of the Rings having new installments coming out in 2022. So hopefully this very strong Season 2 of The Witcher is very good tidings for what is to come in the future. So anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank y'all again. Adios, comrades.